Hi, I'm Ethan Chase, a New York City-based small business growth coach. And let me start out, full disclosure, I am not an economist, nor do I pretend to be one on TV. But what I am, as are many other people in the domain of business, right now contemplating and trying to figure out, and have been for some time, how Trump's tariffs are going to have a measurable, discernible impact on our economy. Well, what I'd like to do tonight, because there's spotlight in the news from some announcements they made yesterday, August 19th, I'd like to go into today's video looking at John Deere and then pull back out from John Deere as poster child for dealing with these tariffs and these trade wars with other countries, and then look at the macro level from the US economy as a whole. So let's start on Yahoo Finance. In wake of Trump's tariffs, John Deere announces mass layoffs. So I have done videos before on John Deere, not favorable, where I talked about their kowtowing, giving in to right-wing bloggers by doing away with their corporate DE&I initiatives. So I'm coming back at John Deere in terms of the tariff impact. Okay, from Robert McCoy at Yahoo Finance. Yesterday, Tuesday, John Deere has been hit hard by President Trump's tariffs. The farm equipment manufacturer and industry bellwether just announced mass layoffs affecting more than 200 workers at three Midwestern plants, which is three plants in Iowa and Illinois, have hundreds of employees being laid off for no other reason than fear of what's going to happen in the markets they compete in because of these tariffs. The company is set to fire 115 people at its facility in East Moline in Illinois later this month in August, according to the Des Moines Register. Next month, September, 52 employees at a facility in Moline will be axed, as will 71 employees at a facility in Waterloo, Iowa, are also going to be terminated. Why? Again, for no other reason than tariffs and the adverse impact they'll have on John Deere, the farm equipment manufacturer. As stated on our most recent earnings call, the struggling agricultural economy continues to impact our orders for John Deere equipment, said the company in a statement. This is a challenging time for many farmers, growers, and producers, and directly impacts our business in the near term. It's only challenging times because of the absolute nitwit in the White House and the pathological desire to punish perceived enemy countries who are not carrying their full weight or not doing their fair share from a trade imbalance standpoint. Okay? In the same earnings call, John Deere attributed a slowdown in Q3 sales to customer cautiousness amid Trump's freewheeling tariff policy. If you have customers that are concerned about what their end markets are going to look like as a result of this tariff environment, our customers, our John Deere customers, are waiting to see the outcomes of what the trade deals are going to look like, said John Deere executive Corey Reed. The primary drivers for the change from last quarter, Q2, to Q3 are increased tariff rates on Europe, on India, and the rising price for consumer goods and manufacturing agricultural products for steel and aluminum, said Josh Beal, the company's director of investor relations, estimating that tariffs have already, to this date in August of 2025, cost John Deere $300 million in 2025. Beal forecasts a full-year tariff impact of nearly $600 million. The news comes as evidence, increasingly accumulates, that ordinary Americans are shouldering the cost of this administration's insane trade policy. Okay? So that's John Deere. I want to start out with John Deere at a micro level. So let's go to Common Dreams website. Mass layoffs at John Deere followed depressed sales caused by Trump tariffs. This is not some kind of result where John Deere is responding to different preferences, supply chain challenges, different demographics or consumer trends or growth in populations affecting the need, the demand for their agriculture products. This was all artificially created. Equipment manufacturers like John Deere have lost millions, in their case, 300 million year to date. But let's remember that working people are hit the hardest by this president's disastrous economic policy, said one lawmaker. So I want to walk you through Brad Reed yesterday, August 19th, in Common Dreams. US President Trump has pitched his tariffs on foreign goods as a way to bring more manufacturing jobs back to the United States. Okay, that's not how this works. And I don't need to tell you all. You all are probably a lot more knowledgeable about the economic implications of these trade wars. However, it appears as though these tariffs are hurting manufacturing jobs that are already here in the United States. As reported by the Des Moines, Iowa, iconic American machinery company John Deere announced on Monday, the 18th of August, that it's going to lay off the 71 workers in Waterloo, Iowa next month, September, 115 people at East Moline, Illinois, starting later this month, and then another 52 folks at the same facility in Moline, Illinois, next month. The paper noted that John Deere has laid off more than 2,000 employees since April of 2024. It's a challenging time for many farmers, growers, and producers, and directly impacts our business in the near term, John Deere emphasized. According to the New Republic, Corey Reed, president of John Deere Worldwide Agriculture and Turf Division, said during the company's most recent earnings call that the uncertainty surrounding Trump's tariffs has led many farmers putting off investments in farm equipment. Look, when you're not sure what's going on, and I see this in my consulting practice, every day we have conversations amongst ourselves, consultants, coaches, business owners, executives. We're all struggling to figure out the why, the how, the what of all of this. If you have consumers who are concerned about what their end markets are going to look like, as I read to you in the previous resource, our customers at John Deere and everybody's waiting to see what these trade deals are going to end up looking like, especially when one day we want to go after Greenland, then we want to go after Sweden, then India, then it just becomes Mexico, Canada. It just becomes really, really difficult to figure it out. It's kind of like Russian roulette. I mean, how do you figure out what your market is going to look like? John Beal is the director of John Deere's investor relations. He said that the primary drivers for the company's negative outlook from the prior quarter are increased tariff rates. Again, I read that to you before. John Deere is once again laying off Iowans, a clear sign economic uncertainty hits the working class hardest, not CEOs at the top. He wrote in a post on X, cheered on by Joni Ernst. Republicans in Washington want to play games with tariffs and give tax cuts to billionaires, while Iowa farmers continue to struggle. It's time to stop protecting the top 1%, fight for the working people. It almost sounds like a Bernie Sanders being picked up from, Vermont and moved over to Iowa and planted there. But for sure, Representative Jim McGovern, a Democrat from Massachusetts, also ripped Trump's trade policies for hurting blue-collar jobs. Look, this is going on all over the country. But because of Trump's tariffs, farmers can't afford to buy what they need to make a living, McGovern said. Equipment manufacturers like John Deere have lost millions, 300 million year to date for John Deere, and they estimate by the end of the year the tariffs are going to adversely impact them to the tune of $600 million. Let's remember, working people are hit hardest by what's going on. John Deere is not the only big-name American manufacturer to be harmed by Trump's tariffs, as all three of the country's major auto manufacturers in recent months have announced they expect to take significant financial hits. Ford said that its profit could drop 36% this year. It expects to take on a $2 billion hit from the president's tariffs on key inputs like steel, like aluminum, as well as taxes on car components manufactured in Canada and Mexico, where Trump just decided, I don't like these countries. even though they've been our historical trading partners and some of our best country friends for decades. Don't like them. We're going to punish them. GM last month also cited Trump's tariffs as a major reason why its profits fell by $3 billion in the previous quarter. Making matters worse, GM said that the impact of these Trump tariffs would be even more significant in the coming quarter, when its profits could tumble by as much as $5 billion. You and I both know what corporate America's consistent dance is with result to trying economic times. What do you think is going to happen? Go ahead. Layoffs, scaling back employees in their workforce, and forcing employees to do more with less. It always hits employees. Okay? GM's warning that it's going to come up short in its financial performance, its fiscal quarter, came just after Jeep manufacturer Stellantis. You may remember Stellantis. I did a very, very negative video of them a few months ago about their business practices. But Stellantis projected that Trump's tariffs would directly lead to $350 million in losses in the first half of 2025. This is, again, to belabor a point or beat a dead horse and turn it into Elmer's glue. This is an artificially constructed adverse scenario being forced upon American corporations by the Trump administration. Who's going to suffer? Employees and consumers, not CEOs. You know it, and I know it. So that's kind of where I wanted to start out with, is John Deere. And one more article, going to news.johndeere.com. So literally a John Deere e-newsletter. End of the road. John Deere cuts 238 jobs in Illinois and Iowa. I read that to you, but I just want to touch on some of the points that are mentioned here. Company's financial strain. 26% drop in quarterly profit. Net income falling to 1.3 billion. Sales fell 9% to 12 billion. Still a billion-dollar corporation, nothing to sneeze at. But again, this is unnecessary. It is completely unnecessary. It's at the arbitrary whims and the vagaries of a president who doesn't understand basic economic principles in the slightest, nor does he or his administration possess even a modicum of ethics and moral compass. This is ridiculous that this is going on. So there are industry-wide challenges, looking at the manufacturing from the agriculture space. John Deere's direct competitors, AGCO and CNH Industrial, also reported weaker sales tied to tariffs and farmer caution about outlays on expenditures that they financially can't afford. Tariff uncertainty and low commodity prices have made farmers very careful about spending, said Jonathan Secreta, a market analyst at CFRA Research. So looking ahead, despite these layoffs at John Deere still stressed it's committed to its U.S. operations. So they talk about pledges they make, et cetera, but doesn't change the fact that these tariffs are unnecessary. So let's go to PBS. I want to pull back away from John Deere now for a moment as an example, as a case study, and how this is impacting corporations. And I want to look at the macro level from an economic view of the landscape of American business and industry, vis-a-vis impact from Trump's tariffs. So let's go to PBS, okay? Josh Boak from the AP. Trump's tariffs would cost U.S. employers $82.3 billion. This is going to cause, not likely, it will result in price hikes and layoffs. We've seen this before. This article is from last month, July 2nd. An analysis finds a critical group of U.S. employers would face a direct cost of $82.3 billion from Trump's current tariff plans. This sum could potentially be managed through price hikes, layoffs, hiring freezes, and/or lower profit margins. Those criteria, those factors will most adversely impact who? It's a rhetorical. Consumers and employees. It's never senior leadership in corporate America. It's never billionaires. It's going to be on the shoulders of the American workforce and the American consumer. The analysis conducted by JP Morgan Chase Institute is among the first studies of its kind to measure the direct cost created by the import taxes on businesses with between 10 million and 1 billion in annual revenues. It's a category including approximately 1/3 of private sector US workers. 1/3 of all US private sector employees are going to be adversely impacted. These companies are more dependent than other businesses on imports from China, India, Thailand, and the retail and wholesale sectors would be especially vulnerable to the import taxes being levied by Trump. The findings show clear trade-offs from Trump's import taxes, contradicting his own claim that foreign manufacturers would be responsible for absorbing the cost on the tariffs instead of US companies. That's not how this works. If I say I'm going to put a tariff on you, other trading partner country, on your products that are coming into our country, it's going to be a pass along. We increase the price for them to do business here in our market. They increase the price of their products to the ultimate end consumer. That's how this works. While tariffs that were launched under Trump have yet to boost overall inflation, large companies like Amazon, Costco, Walmart, Williams-Sonoma all delayed potential reckoning by building up inventories before the taxes could have been imposed. So they gathered inventory, which, by the way, is not something you typically want to do. It flies in the face of just-in-time and inventory management controls and measures, but the analysis comes just ahead of the July 9th deadline by Trump to formally set the tariff rates on goods from dozens of countries. Trump imposed this July 9th deadline after the financial markets panicked in response to his April tariff announcements, prompting him to schedule a 90-day negotiating period when most imports faced a 10% baseline increase. Tariff. China, Mexico, Canada face higher rates, and there are separate 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum, as I alluded to before in the case of John Deere specifically. Had the initial April 2nd tariffs remained in place instead of getting pushed back 90 days, the companies in the JP Morgan Chase Institute analysis would have faced additional direct costs of $187.6 billion. Under the current rates to be implemented and have gone into effect, the $82.3 billion estimate would be equivalent on average to $2,080 per employee, or 3.1% of the United States average annual payroll. These averages include firms that don't import goods and those that do. So sharing the pain across the economic landscape. Asked Tuesday how trade talks are faring, this is going back last month to July, Trump said simply, everything's going well. All is well. Remain calm. The president has indicated he'll set tariff rates given the logistical challenge of negotiating with so many nations. As the 90-day period came to a close, only the United Kingdom has signed a trade framework with the Trump administration. Trump announced last month that he reached a deal with Vietnam, while India has signaled it's close to agreeing on a trade framework. Does this scare you? Of course it does. Does this mean we're going to have a tremendous adverse impact to workers and the ultimate folks who always bear the brunt of this, consumers, who, by the way, they're one and the same with workers. It's the American citizenry who's going to bear the brunt on this. So, hundreds of items just got a lot more expensive to import into the US because of Trump's tariffs. So now we're going to August 19th. So yesterday on CNN, hundreds of different goods just got a lot more expensive to import into the US now that President Donald Trump's 50% tariff on steel and aluminum is officially in place. What might you ask? What are the products? Just for giggles, here's a random representative sampling. Butter knives, baby strollers, spray deodorants, fire extinguishers, considered derivative of steel and aluminum products, were previously excluded from the 50% tariff. Though they were still subject to the higher country-specific tariffs Trump enacted over the last several months. However, on last Friday, U.S. Customs and Border Protection and a division of the U.S. Commerce Department published notices informing U.S. importers that 407 categories of goods containing steel and aluminum are immediately subject to the 50% tariffs at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time on Monday. Okay, on Monday, the 18th. The non-steel and non-aluminum components of the products face other applicable levies. So when this administration, knee-jerk, just kind of throws this stuff, against the wall or pulls the pin from the grenade and throws it into the trenches of American business, the abrupt move leaves many U.S.-based importers between a rock and a hard place, with goods they already paid for currently in transit on its way into the U.S. If they decide to accept the goods, the importers are going to have to pay considerably higher tariffs. But if they, for instance, tell cargo operators, no, don't unload our orders at our U.S. ports to avoid paying these tariffs, they're going to lose money. It's a no-win for companies who are bringing products from abroad into the U.S. for the U.S. consumer market. Today's action expands the reach of the steel and aluminum tariffs and shuts down avenues for circumvention, supporting the continued revitalization of the American steel and aluminum industries. Undersecretary of Commerce for Industry and Security Jeffrey Kessler said in a statement on Tuesday, "Oh my God, has there ever been an administration that's been so lacking in knowledge, so clueless, so apathetic towards the plight of American business and industry, of American consumers and American workers? How do you sleep with yourself?" Today's action expands the reach. So that's Jeffrey Kessler, right? Undersecretary of Commerce. This is second in command. As is the case with any tariff in place, businesses may not pass on the entire tariff expense they've paid to consumers for the raising prices. But the chances of businesses absorbing a tariff as high as 50% will likely be slimmer compared to goods tariffed at lower rates. But that's kind of Captain Obvious. In addition to the 50% tariff on copper-based goods that recently took effect, the levies will likely ripple through the manufacturing supply chain, raising production costs across construction, automotive, and the electronics sectors, analysts at Telsey Group said yesterday. Okay, so the shock and awe tariffs haven't fueled a manufacturing jobs pool. So if ostensibly you're doing this, as this administration claims, to generate more jobs in the US by protecting US markets from products coming in from abroad, if that's your contention, you're ignorant and you're also wrong. So let's go to Matt Egan at CNN. President Donald Trump's shock and awe tariff campaign is off to a slow start when it comes to reviving American manufacturing jobs. And by the way, you look at this data in dovetail with the Bureau of Labor Statistics monthly jobs reports, and we're not seeing the jobs growth that one would expect commensurate with the promise of putting these kinds of tariffs in place on goods coming in from other country markets. While it will take time for the full impact of these tariffs to fully be measured and tracked, the early results suggest that not only have tariffs failed to inspire a hiring boom, but the chaotic policy rollout is paralyzing business. There's fear. And this is what I've noticed, which is why I wanted to do this video. Every conversation I have with potential clients, with business referral partners, with founders and startups and entrepreneurs and senior executives and people in logistics and price cost containment and supply chain, they're all singing the same tune: chaos, fear, uncertainty, which is forcing them to curtail expenditures. It's the same. Economists and trade researchers say the haphazard nature of the trade war is compounding the longer-term pressure on U.S. manufacturing. And I am not going to go into an economic deep dive on this, but I promise you I'll put the links to all of these in the description to the video below. So if you want to wonk out or nerd into the economic data, it'll be there for you. So even as Trump spiked tariffs to levels unseen in nearly a century, the manufacturing sector lost a combined 14,000 net jobs in May and June alone, according to federal data. Manufacturing employment has little changed overall since Trump took office in January. So when we look at the year snapshot, we see manufacturing is yet to see a boost from tariffs, a boost in jobs creation. Executives in the manufacturing industry say President Trump's tariff changes are causing uncertainty, contradicting White House claims that the recent trade reforms have stabilized the manufacturing sector. Hiring in this sector dropped to a 9-year low in May. So you look at the jobs creation going back to 2015. So going back over a 10-year run, you see jobs spiked in 2020. Companies rehire after mass layoffs due to COVID. There was a spike to 628,000 jobs hired in May of 2020. And then the number shoots down to 385. And it grew early on in 2022, and then it dipped again. You see this tremendous pattern since actually the end of last year, and it just trends down. Those are the missing jobs in manufacturing from these tariffs. Factoring hiring plunged in May, below even the COVID-19 pandemic pace, to the weakest rate since 2016 under Barack Obama, according to BLS. Manufacturing job openings, a sign of what's to come, have plunged by nearly 100,000 since Trump took office in January. Instead of giving bosses a reason to hire more employees, this whiplash approach to the trade war is sowing confusion and uncertainty. CEOs need clarity on where tariffs will be in the long run, but under Trump, it's not even clear where tariffs will be at the end of the day. We don't know what's going to happen next week. You want to talk about later in the year? We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. If he's not happy with his McDonald's Happy Meal, or if somebody says something on social media, or if he decides to go after another blue state or another major city and bring in the National Guard. It is creating, quite succinctly, a hellacious environment for manufacturing. Manufacturing executives have complained they don't know the rules of the road, making it impossible to forecast demand and decide whether to hire workers or fire them. How could you know in this environment? The tariff mess has utterly stopped sales globally and domestically. Everyone is on pause. Orders have collapsed, one machinery executive said in a survey released last month that was conducted by the Institute for Supply Management. Another manufacturing exec said there's too much volatility in policy to make long-term decisions. So let me read this to you. Tariffs, chaos, sluggish economy, rising prices. Oh, Ukraine, Iran, geopolitical unrest on a global scale all make for a landscape that is hellacious and fatigue is setting in, a metals executive said in this ISM survey. Lastly, from CNN, from Matt Egan, going back to July. So I am skipping around a little bit on the dates, but Wall Street's Trump always chickens out. Trade has a chicken and an egg problem. So Trump taco is having whiplash effect. Tariff man is back again, and so is Wall Street's taco trade. Trump always chickens out. That's the acronym he was anointed with. I didn't make it up. President Donald Trump is once more threatening to lob massive duties on a wide swath of U.S. imports, everything from copper, pharmaceuticals, to goods from Japan and Russia. Yet Wall Street's barely flinching, with some investors betting Trump will repeat his tendency to back down. This was July. He didn't back down. As I just noted, and as everybody who's watching this knows, as of this week of August 18, we're in effect now with these tariffs that were announced for steel and aluminum last Friday. The muted response from Wall Street back in July last month is the latest instance of what's known as the taco trade policy of US in the current administration. What is it short for? Trump always chickens out. He steers us toward disaster and then at the last minute steers us away from disaster. And then he says, look, I saved us. Michael Block, market strategist at Third Seventh Capital, told CNN in a phone interview yesterday. So let's go to the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis. So there are regional Federal Reserves, and then there's the National Federal Reserve. So this came out of the Minneapolis Federal Reserve Division. Tallying the two channels of job loss, okay, of job losses from tariffs. 2018 to 2019 China trade war offers estimates of or anecdotal comparison of potential jobs lost to retaliation and rising input costs. So you impose tariffs on us, we're going to retaliate. And it's one thing when a relatively minor global country market is saying this to the United States, but when it's China, different story altogether. So I want to go to this report, Jeff Horowitz and Michael Waugh from the Federal Reserve Bank in Minneapolis. One argument for tariffs relies on the idea that they're going to expand U.S. manufacturing employment in theory. A unilateral tariff would advantage U.S. manufacturing firms relative to foreign competition and result in more U.S. job opportunities. However, experience with previous unilateral increases in tariffs, so unilateral meaning imposed by one country market on another, increase in tariff casts doubt that they will increase U.S. employment for two reasons. So we don't know that jobs are going to be created as a result of these tariff wars for two reasons. U.S. tariffs result in higher input costs for U.S. firms, and sovereign nations, those who are dealing with these tariffs coming at them from the US, will retaliate against US exports going into their country markets. This is something that is so obvious to anybody who's ever studied microeconomics, macroeconomics, trade imbalances. I mean, why? Why is this the course of action that this administration took? Research studying the US-China trade war going back to 2018, 2019 found that these costs of tariffs outweighed any benefits and resulted in aggregate job loss. Modest, but job loss. Extrapolating this evidence to today suggests that the current tariff scenarios that are now in play on China alone, so only China, tariff war between the US and China would cost between 955,000 to 3.4 million US worker jobs. Let's say that again. Using data from a comparable period of unilateral tariff applied by the US on China going back to 2018, 2019, an estimate, a conservative estimate, is between 955,000 jobs, American jobs lost, up to 3.4 million jobs lost. And that's just the China trade war. And this is so lacking. It makes no sense. So hiring slows in the US. Aha. Here we go. I'm going to go back to June. I'm going to go back to June for a moment. Hiring slows in the US amid uncertainty over Trump's trade wars. So US employers slowed hiring last month in May, but still added, conservatively speaking, a solid number, 139,000 jobs amid the uncertainty of Trump's tariff wars. Hiring fell from a revised 147,000 in April. Department of Labor said Friday, back in June. The job gains last month, May, were above the 130,000 that economists had forecast, but revisions later on shaved 95,000 jobs off of March and April payrolls, American company payrolls. The unemployment rate at the time in June was 4.2%. So where are we seeing jobs growth? Healthcare added 62,000 jobs. Bars and restaurants added 30,000. The federal government, because of this administration's pathological need to hurt its federal government employees, they laid off 22,000 people, which is the most since November of 2020, as Trump's job cuts and hiring freeze had an impact. Oh, and going back to June, factories lost 8,000 jobs. So we're seeing the data to support how these tariff wars and the last few months of behavior coming out of this administration are having a negative zero-sum impact on jobs, pricing, and our US business ability to compete abroad. What does that also mean? It means Trump's aggressive and unpredictable policies, especially in sweeping taxes on imports, have confused or muddied the outlook for the economy and the job market and raised fears that the American economy could be headed toward recession. And we see that playing out with the whole discussion from the Federal Reserve nationally in terms of interest rates. We haven't seen the data yet to substantiate the adverse impact nationally. Even during peak trade uncertainty, the labor market remains fairly solid, said Seema Shah, chief global strategist at Principal Asset Management. Okay, all right. But where did I start? At John Deere, venerable old agriculture, manufacturing American institution, icon of Industrial Revolution, John Deere. But let's go back even further to April. Ty Roush, a writer on Forbes staff, wrote that Procter & Gamble will cut 7,000 jobs, latest from tariffs. So let's check this out. Procter & Gamble announced Thursday, back in April, that they'd cut 7,000 jobs globally over the next 2 years amid, here's the rationale, increased volatility posed by tariffs and geopolitical dynamics, becoming the last firm to cut workers while citing the possible market impact. Excuse me, not the last, the latest firm to cut workers while citing the possible market impact of Trump's taxes. In a presentation at the Deutsche Bank Consumer Conference in Paris, announced a 2-year-long restructuring program at Procter & Gamble. This is going back to June 5th, that will cut 7,000 jobs globally. Why? Why? And lastly, jumping over to the New York Times, a final snapshot. Layoffs, not playoffs, layoffs, price increases, companies make hard choices as Trump's tariffs set in. So let's look at a micro level. Businesses that had been in a holding pattern during President Trump's evolving trade war back in April-May timeframe are starting to plan ahead with more conviction. And their planning is brutal, scary, and it's brutal. Okay, so Sydney Ember at the New York Times. Barry Barr has taken a number of cost-saving measures in recent months to keep his outdoor apparel company afloat during President Trump's destabilizing trade war. He froze his spending on marketing and even prohibited his employees from traveling to see customers. But while he waited for President Trump's tariffs to come into better focus, he resisted making more consequential decisions at his company, Cavu True Outdoor Wear. He didn't raise prices on his fall lineup. He continued manufacturing bags, woven shirts, polar fleece, and other items at factories in China, India, Vietnam, even though Trump signaled that those countries would face stiff duties. It's a sit and wait, honestly. Barry Barr said last month. We just don't know. This week, Mr. Barr was trying to wrap his head around the punishing new tariffs that are set to click on shortly after midnight on Thursday. It was hard for him to know whether the slate of duties on about 90 countries would ultimately hold, given the ever-evolving nature of Mr. Trump's trade policy, or the daily journey of indecision, which is on again, off again, on again, off again. Tree, ball. On Wednesday, Mr. Trump signed an executive order that would double tariffs on India to 50% beginning this month in an effort to stop the country from buying Russian oil. He also threatened to impose a 100% tariff on foreign semiconductors. The latest tariff orders confirmed from Mr. Barr that he's going to have to raise prices after all, and he's going to have to do what? What? Lay off employees. There will be some tough decisions to be made for sure, he said. You have to put your big kid pants on and do it. And this is, at a micro level, a company-specific example of now all of a sudden having to contend with the ramifications of this artificially created trade war. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you liked this video. I hope you found it useful in framing some context around the current state of affairs of President Trump's and his administration's tariff war against other countries. But who's going to suffer? American business and industry, and specifically American workers and American consumers who have always borne the brunt when things like this happen. So, if you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. If you haven't done so, subscribe to my YouTube channel. It really helps support the work that I'm doing. And drop a comment. Let me know what you think about this. How are the tariffs and the trade wars affecting your business and your outlook and the market you compete in? Thank you so much for taking time to check out this video, and best of luck in all of your business pursuits. Take care.